Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And Dragonflight has been absolutely amazing so far. Week by week by week, we have been seeing changes made to the game, active tuning, things that players have been asking for a long time. But that also does mean that metas will be shifting, specs will be rising, and it's really important to try and stay ahead of that so you know what compositions and classes are looking good so that you can keep getting great results. So in today's video, I'm going to be covering 7 more overpowered PvP specs. These are specs that are possibly rising through the ranks due to the given changes, whether they be buffs to their specs or nerfs to others, which are also important to consider. And if you missed those recent rounds of updates, I'll have that video linked at the end of this one. And make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a beat, so you're always getting great results. Let's get started here. Coming in the number 7 position is going to be, surprisingly, the Arms Warrior. And the main reason I think that the Arms Warrior is getting better and better is that pretty much with every patch you are getting damage buffs, not to mention that Fury's survivability is coming down, which is the main contention for Arms Warrior, having lost Ignore Pain and defensive stance nerfs to the specialization definitely hindered it. Meanwhile, Fury got to be able to get War Paint plus defensive stance into this next expansion, as well as tremendous self-healing and sustain. So as Fury Warrior's self-healing goes down, as it seems like they have been targeting self-healing specifically, I think that Arms Warrior is likely going to start to rise in power. It's going to start getting some massive burst damage, already starting to see it pop up, especially in situations like the solo queue ladder. Having looked at the representations of the spec, it was already performing a lot better than I actually had originally anticipated for it, and given all of the changes that are incoming now, I think that it's just going to get better and better for the Arms Warrior. So you're really going to start to see some results with this specialization, but it is coming in at the bottom of this top 7. Moving into the number 6 position is the Restoration Shaman, and this might be one that is being slept on at the moment, given that it is constantly getting healing buffs, healing buffs, healing buffs. In the most recent round, it's going to be Riptide and Healing Stream Totem. Now, when these spells specifically are powerful in PvP, Resto Shaman is in a phenomenal position to be strong. Now, I do think that no matter how much it gets buffed in solo queue, keeping somebody to stand in your Earthen Wall Totem, keeping somebody standing in your Spirit Link Totem, those are going to be rough times in solo queue, but in ranked team play, especially given how much more powerful some caster DPS are getting, Resto Shaman is likely going to be looking very good in those positions given these throughput buffs. Now moving into the number 5 position is going to be the Destruction Warlock. And this is a spec that I think pretty much everybody would have said is like the worst spec in the game. But given these throughput numbers that we're starting to see, 5% Chaos Bolt damage, 15% in PvP, Shadow Burn 30%, Incinerate by 30%, the Incinerate being a really big one, makes me think that DESTRO Warlock is going to have a tremendous amount of throughput and be a very formidable and scary threat as it had been in the past. So very curious to see how this specialization performs, especially with its synergies to some other specializations that are getting even stronger that may have already been in a great position. So definitely one to keep your eye on. I love that they're targeting the specs that were kind of towards the bottom end and raising them up. And these types of numbers might seem big, but Destro was kind of wet noodling people. So I'm really excited to see where this one ends up. Destro Warlock could definitely be delivering here moving into this next round of hot fixes. Number 4 position is the Shadow Priest, and just all across the board, damage buffs, Vampiric Touch, Shadow Pain, Shadowy Apparition, Devouring Plague, Mind Blast, Mind Spike, and Mind Flay. Shadow Priest was already a top performer. There are some nerfs to more or less some of their cheese mechanics with the Asarge one-shots in Fears with Mindbender, but the trade-off for that is that you're just going to be doing a lot of damage outside of that window, which a lot of specializations are going to enjoy in PvP. So Shadow Priest is likely going to become even more of a fun spec to play and more competitive as a result. I'm seeing a lot of Shadow Priest comps rising back from the grave that I haven't seen in quite some time. Things like Shadow Priest Frost Mage, for example. Shadow Priest Mage has not really been on the table, but recently, and especially given some changes to Mage, it could definitely be on the rise. Shadow Priest Destruction Warlock could be very scary. Shadow Priest Assassination Rogue. You're really going to be able to multi-flex with this. The only reason that I didn't put this one as number 1 is because it was already such an amazing spec, but you really have to talk about it more. Honestly, could have substituted the Shadow Shadow Priest. For Devastation Evoker, maybe more towards the bottom end of the list, mostly just because Devastation Evoker, we could say it's an honorable mention. Some players are starting to find some different stat builds. I've noticed Mastery becoming more prevalent for Devastation Evoker, and Disintegrate getting damage buffs every patch means that Devastation could have a spot. I still think defensively it's pretty weak, especially in team play, so it might be held back, but definitely could have swapped it out. But like, you can't ignore this, right? This is something that I think that we needed to talk about. Shadow Priest is a phenomenal spec. Number 3 position is going to be the Unholy Death Knight. Now, despite the nerfs to Death Strike, and Death Strike being effectively not really a button you press anymore, you still have amazing survivability outside of that. With the Spell Warden honor talent, we could go into the whole debate of this not being a good way of defense, RNG defense versus controlled defense. But I'm not here to really debate that. I would agree with you. I think Death Strike being a more powerful heal and Spell Warden being nerfed would have been the right direction. But it's just getting damage buffs, right? Like, look at this giant block of changes: Soul Reaper damage, Icy Talon's duration increase, Apocalypse Ghouls lasting longer, Death Quill damage, Clawing Shadows damage, Scourge Strike damage, Plague Bringer duration getting increased by 5 seconds, Reaping now increases the damage of your Soul Reaper, Scourge Strike, Festering Strike, and Death Quill by 25% damage, below 35% from 20%. So Unholy Death Knight now with this damage outside of its cooldown window is going to be getting into an even better position in terms of competitive viability. It's also a spec that is still 100% anti-caster, and given the buffs that we're seeing to Destruction Warlock, given all the prevalence of other casters at the moment like Demonology Warlock and Shadow Priest, I think that Unholy Death Knight is really going to be owning it up now after this most recent round of changes. Moving into the number 2 position is going to be the Frost Mage. This spec was already surprisingly good from what I've been able to see from it, and you're just getting 12% Ice Lance damage, 15% Flurry damage, 15% Frostbolt damage, 15% Glacial Spike damage, and if you wanted to play a Splitting Ice build, it's also going to be doing 15% more damage. So Frost Mage is going to be trucking people with pressure. All the different builds get buffed with this change, whether you wanted to be a Glacial Spike build, an Ice Lance build, or something like that. So Frost Mage, Destruction Warlock, that composition has been really nasty in the past. Both of these specializations got monstrous buffs. We're seeing self-sustain going down on melee DPS. So Frost Mage, Destro Warlock, Frost Mage, Shadow Priest, these double spellcaster comps could be really gnarly, very scary. Definitely something to keep an eye on, or possibly consider counters to, which I would consider to be things like the Death Knight, Demon Hunter, but even that might begin to struggle. This could be the top dog composition and combination of specs. And of course, those combinations of specs are going to need somebody to heal them. And this might come as a surprise coming in the number 1 position, because it's not the healer that you're expecting. I know what you're going to type in right now if you think that it's Preservation Evoker, but it's not. The number 1 spec to keep an eye out for is the Mistweaver Monk. And you might be thinking, well, what? There's literally Blackout Kick and Tiger Palm damage here. The main reason for Mistweaver Monk being on this page is that the Fist Weaving build is definitely here. It has arrived. There's even more changes into the future in the next patch for Mistweaver Monk, but it is doing like 20k damage. It's doing ridiculous DPS on this specialization, and I think paired up with double caster like a Destro Warlock and a Frost Mage, they can keep enemies under control, get you into the fight, and dealing a lot of pressure, that this spec could absolutely be cracking people. It is a stacked spec. Do not underrate it. Do not underestimate it. Mistweaver Monk is absolutely insane at the moment, and I think that as players adapt to the new fist weaving playstyle of it and get more accustomed to it, picking their moments to go in and out, that it is going to be one of the best specs you could possibly pick. Overall, pretty much every spec is winning in this patch. I'm going to be updating my tier list to try and account for everything that's gone on here after a couple of days of this next update, so that we can get a better idea overall of where all the specs are sitting and the overall direction of the game, so you can keep thinking about what specs and comps to be playing. And again, if you want to stay up to date with that information, do hit the subscribe button. Your support is appreciated. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. I do hope you've enjoyed this top 7 and got a little bit of insight into what is going to be going on Tuesday when the servers reset. So good luck, gladiators, in your push, and I will see you in the next video.